And during the traumas that are here for us and what's happening in the region, particularly, a deep feeling that is here for many of us is that there's a lot of division and uncertainty inside of us. And what we're going to be doing today is speaking about what is happening inside of us. How is it impacting how we're thinking, how we're feeling, and what can we actually do to take care of and tend to ourselves and those around us in a conscious, healthy way. And also, I'll give you some tips and some suggestions on things you don't want to be doing or trying to avoid during this time. And then at about 1:30, my colleague Madiha will be taking us through a healing meditation for about 10 to 15 minutes, which is one soothing strategy to tend to your inner world during this time. And then the remaining 10 to 15 minutes will also be a space for you to ask us any questions that you may have, and also share what is here for you. And throughout the duration of today's talk, if at any point you start feeling quite overwhelmed by something that is named or expressed, give yourself permission to get up, stretch, move. You may even turn the volume of my voice down. You may leave the session at any point. It is also going to be recorded so you can revisit it later. And so it's, I feel my heart racing and kind of beating both very fast and very slow at the same time as I think about naming and acknowledging what's here within all of us. And we're naming that it's not only one atrocity that we're holding in our mind, in our heart, in the region. We're holding in our minds Palestine, Libya, Morocco, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Sudan, Yemen, and that for the first time in history, we are seeing that we are really live beings. We are seeing these horrors live streamed. And I want you to have a bit of an image of what's happening in our practical lives, where we are working and then we look at our phone and we see a horrific image or a headline in the news. Whether you are directly connected to those countries or not, does not measure the gravity of the pain or the impact of what you may be experiencing. You can imagine we look at this on our phone and then we go back to driving, tending to our families, working, responding to emails, and then we look at our phone again. And you can imagine when you look at your phone and you connect with social media or the news at this time, there's something, I want to zoom into what's happening inside, which is every cell in your body and muscle is going like this and contracting. And it's saying the world is not safe. Because when you see that image or those world, that what's happening in the world, the body is saying it's contracting and the heart is saying something is not safe. There's a threat that's here. So your jaw is tensing, your shoulders are bracing itself, your stomach may be bracing itself and saying something is not right. And this threat system inside of our body is deeply activated. And you can imagine how incredibly splitting it is when everything inside the body is saying something's not right and it's clenching. Every cell in the body is responding to what you see. And the brain cannot necessarily discern, the brain and the heart cannot necessarily discern that's happening somewhere else, right? When you see it and you engage with what is happening around us, it is here and now. And so you can imagine how incredibly splitting it is when you see this. Every cell is responding: mind, body, heart, hands, muscles. And then we're saying no one around, everything in me, it feels different, but no one around me can actually see that everything is different, right? Things around you may feel the same, where there's business as usual, there's still your life that you're tending to. So something very unique about the secondary trauma and the ripple effects of what's here is that it's very splitting as you're navigating your life. So we're going to, one of the strategies in which we navigate very difficult times is we want to give voice to what's happening inside of you so that you can be more conscious, compassionate, and considerate about what is actually happening inside of me and also inside of my team members and the people that I care about in my life. So I'm not going to share any type of PowerPoint with you today. I'm just going to speak to you. And I want to specifically name that when we say that invisible injury, we call it an acute stress reaction. And when you think about these moments where you know what is happening and you engage with the news, there is an invisible injury inside. And I will always say that if you could see these injuries inside, like imagine when it's fresh, it's like an open wound. And there's a series of injuries that we're sustaining internally that are happening each time we're aware of what's going on and we are engaging with what's happening in the world and the horror of it. And I'm going to really specifically name what are common feelings, what are common bodily sensations, and things that may be happening inside of you. And I want you to know that for every single one of you, that means your brother, your sister, your mother, your colleague, your friend, each one of us is going to respond very, very differently. And there's really no right or wrong way to respond as long as you are being considerate of others and yourself, right? Now, there are some signs that I'll say we absolutely need to get professional help. If at any point you're having panic attacks, if you're feeling like you do not have the will to live or there's suicidal thoughts, if you're using a lot of substances to cope, or if you're just saying, I can't, I'm just really struggling to get out of bed and function and do the things I need to. If you're feeling that way at any point in this journey, whether it is today or in 1 month or 6 months, then it's so important that you do not go at this alone and you are connected with professional support. So you do not, and really I'll say that is one of the worst things that we can do throughout this time is to try and keep everything inside and go at it alone. We want to avoid that. That can actually make things worse. There may be periods of time where you want solitude to be with you, to hear what's coming up for you, but do not go at things alone. Okay. So what can happen is, you know, when we think of that moment when we're seeing, hearing, or feeling, and those cells are clenching inside of us, there are 3 clusters of responses that can come up inside of us. And remember, there's no right or wrong, but these are common things to feel. And it's so important that we name this because most individuals that I see, that our team sees when we're working with trauma, is people will say, I thought I was going crazy. I thought something was wrong with me for feeling these things. Okay. So one of the things that I want you to know and hear me in those moments is that you're not going crazy. There's not something wrong with you if you're feeling these things quite intensely during this time. So one can be this, I want you to visualize almost this very fiery, intense response. So we call it hypervigilance. And I want you to imagine there's a home alarm system in our body, right? It's part of the nervous system in our body that prepares us to survive when there's a threat, right? And so it's a sense of deep panic, that feeling of the world doesn't feel safe. I don't feel safe. So you may be finding right now, because that system is heightened right now, you may find a great sensitivity to light, to noises, where you feel a bit more jumpy. What was that sound? What is happening? You may feel your heart racing and thumping faster. That feeling of, I feel a sense of fear. Your thoughts may be racing, feeling like you can't switch them off, or they may be racing to the worst case scenario. And for some of us, it may have to do with the horror that you're seeing in the news, where we're actually seeing a lot of worst case scenarios. And the ripple effect of that is in other places of your life, even if it's unrelated to the future or unrelated to what's happening, where you're saying, but what if that happens? What if that happens? What if this happens? What if this happens at work? Where the trauma, the impact of the trauma on the system in the body is where the world does not feel safe. And you can imagine as trauma is taking place, it's like this protective shield that we have, that we all walk through the world with. It begins to shatter or become a lot more porous, where we think, if this can happen in the world, then maybe other bad things may happen as well. And that alarm system gets very vigilant. It starts going off from things that typically wouldn't make you feel quite anxious. There may be a great deal of tears, sadness, fear. There may be a trembling or a quiver in your body where it's like, I don't feel like myself. And for many of us, There can also be images, words that are flashing before your eyes. And as I'm naming all of these sensations, I want you to know that we cannot control the arrival of these images or these emotions. So I want you to imagine almost like a metaphorical airport where these difficult emotions, images, sensations, they're arriving. We do not necessarily have control over them, right? Our control is in when that fear, when that panic, when that tearfulness arrives, how are we choosing to respond to it in ourselves and even in the loved ones around us? And I'll speak more about what do I do in some of those moments when something really difficult is arriving and I need to work or I need to function and do things. So I'll come back to that. So think of that fiery response that can be coming. Okay, now another type of response can be what we call hypo-aroused, and it is more of a freeze response. Okay, so this often tends to be one of my go-tos, and we'll all have different moments and almost MOs of how we cope with great overwhelming fear and terror, where you'll say, I feel completely numb. I feel maybe a feeling of detached. Is this real? Am I in a dream? It can be a feeling of paralysis, exhaustion, fatigue, disconnect, where it may be really hard. You may be around people, but you feel like I can't be around them, right? So for many of us, we can see a trauma response may be finding it really hard to relate to others. It may be feeling more disconnected from others. And I also want to mention it's very common to be feeling a lot of anger, rage, guilt, sadness, betrayal. And for many of us, and remember, there's no right or wrong, right? You may be crying or you may be saying, I don't feel anything at all. And there's really no right or wrong way to feel. But for many of us, there can be a great sense of exhaustion inside the body as well. Again, there's no right or wrong, but these are common responses. And some of us may have a more delayed reaction. But before I get to that, I also want to speak more about guilt, which is something that we're hearing so much about, where people are saying, I'm moving through my life and I live in a safe country and I have resources in my life and I have comforts in my home and I feel so incredibly guilty that I am safe and others are not, that there is a deep sense of injustice or unfairness that's coming up. For some of us, there's also a great pain and a loss, or the grief that's here is saying, being confronted with the darkness in others. I think for many of us, and I know especially for me, there's such a hope in the goodness of others. And as you are seeing the horrors, there's a great sense of being confronted with those feelings, anger, and again, not feeling safe. So for some of us, the trauma response right now may also be, I don't feel as safe with other people, right? So again, that can be coming up for you right now as well. Now, that delayed response that I said this is often an individual that will say, something is happening and I'm going to become action oriented. I'm going to advocate. I'm going to donate. I'm going to spread awareness. I'm going to, have a session like this. And where can I begin to make an impact and give back in some way? And this can be really powerful, this kind of call to action. And sometimes we tend to think that person is a strong one, right? They have it all together. And it's not that they're not hurting. That's one way that they're coping with the pain that's here. And oftentimes this individual can have more of a delayed reaction where in the coming weeks or in the coming months, you begin to see some of those trauma responses that I've spoken about today. Again, not right or wrong, but you just want to hold that in mind. I also want you to know, intending to you and those around you, is that taking action in some way can be one soothing strategy. So if you say, I'm feeling so helpless, I'm feeling so hopeless, which are also common responses, right? You may say, donating or reading more about what's happening or supporting others in my life, this feels very meaningful to me. It's also so important that you understand that taking action and doing those things will not solve or cure the grief and the pain of what you're also experiencing right now. They may help soothe you to have an anchor and how you're showing up, in a meaningful way. But we cannot expect, I've done this now, so now I shouldn't feel pain or hurt or grief or the numbness that may be coming up for you. So we really want to hold that in mind, that as we are learning to move with the pain that's here, it's really about soothing our nervous system. And when I say soothing, that is synonymous with regulation. So it's saying, how can I let my body and every cell in my body know that I am safe? Okay, so I want to move to, and I'm going to speak for maybe about 8-ish more minutes, and then I'm going to hand over to Madiha to take us through the meditation, which is a great soothing strategy for your nervous system. So the first thing you want to do is do not make things worse for yourself, right? So one of the worst things that we can be doing is unconsciously, without intention, checking social media. So you can imagine if you're driving, particularly if you're driving, and many of us have a habit of, we'll check our phone, right? It's like a habitual response. And you can imagine you see a horrific headline or image and you're driving, and you may have a huge response where either you feel a great deal of terror, right? Body is nervous, or you may be very disoriented and we think we're okay, but we can actually be deeply impacted. So some guidelines around engaging with your phone and social media right now will be, try not to do it first thing in the morning, where we can be quite vulnerable with our hormones and our stress levels at that time. You want to be conscious and almost brace yourself to say, I'm now going to go online. I'm now going to go into this terrain. And also you want to think about how long you stay in that space, right? I also want you to be mindful of not checking before anything important in your life. So that may be a meeting, it may be a family gathering of some sort. It may be before bed, or maybe before connecting with your children. But the intention is to be conscious and deliberate. You are entering that terrain of trauma when we open it. And I want you to know that for many people, there's a sense of, I need to know, I need to be checking, I need to know what's happening. Many people have loved ones that are connected to these parts of the world. And I'm also saying that it's okay to check, but we want to be conscious and deliberate. And also when there are moments when you're saying, I can't look, it's too much, it's too painful, it's breaking my heart, I'm flooded. Recognizing those signs that were triggered is also really important. It's also okay to take breaks. It's actually, I would say, very important to take breaks from the news and connecting with that content. And I really want us to be thinking about how we connect with others as well, right? So you may say, do you have space for this? Is it okay that I share with you how I'm feeling today? Is to be really deliberate about that as well. So be conscious of your relationship with social media. Try to avoid caffeine if you're feeling quite anxious, which can really further activate that stress and level of anxiety. You also want to try and avoid overstimulating places that are really loud, really bright, that can overwhelm the system even more. So imagine if someone were in the ICU, right? We wouldn't be turning on all the lights and putting on really loud music, or even like putting them in a large group. That may actually be harmful for them. You also want to try to limit engaging with people who typically trigger you or drain you, or maybe they speak about what's happening in a way that just feels so triggering. I also want you to be really conscious and deliberate about your energy with engaging with hateful comments or things online as well. Be very conscious and deliberate about the energy and the impact that may take from you as well. So at the bare minimum, be thinking about, I don't want to make things worse for myself. And what may that be? The other things that we really need to survive and move with this pain is the non-negotiables of trying to get at least 7 hours of sleep, right? That also means drinking enough water, 12 to 14 cups, of staying hydrated. I'm the worst at doing this, but it becomes so important, especially during times like this. Get electrolytes and add it to your water if you tend to struggle with drinking enough as well. You want to eat colorful food because we know the health, even if you're not hungry, you need to be eating, right? Some people may be overeating right now, but whatever that impact is right now, you want to eat colorful foods because your gut health is also connected to the health of your brain and being able to just regulate and tend to letting your body know you're safe. So non-negotiables: sleep, water, movement. I don't care what type of movement you're doing, whether you're going to the gym or not, just a little bit of gentle moving where your heart rate is getting up is going to help burn the tremendous amount of stress hormones, the adrenaline and cortisol that is racing through our body each time we are aware of what's happening in the news. Okay, so those are just the non-negotiables. Movement, rest, sleep, your diet. These are all really important, and hydration. And lastly, I'll take two more. Yeah, I think I'm doing okay on time. We want to search for soothing, not strategies. So I want you to imagine all of those difficult emotions are arriving in this metaphorical airport, right? Like rage, sadness, guilt, grief, generational grief. And I will mention that for so many of us, what's happening now tears open old wounds, generational wounds that our parents and grandparents have experienced. So there's a lot that is coming up that oftentimes is beyond words and our understanding. So we want to acknowledge the difficult feeling. And so for so many of us in the region where we've grown up in families where we haven't had the words to talk about emotions and mental health, many of us aren't so good at this. I want you to start really small, whether it's once a day or once a week, saying, how am I really, like, what emotion is here for me? And if you say, I don't know, that's a good starting point. I don't know how I feel. That's what's here. But is it sadness? Is it guilt? Is it rage? Is it betrayal? Is it, and I didn't say this, but a lot of it can be physical sensations, right? It can be, it feels like metal in my throat, or it feels like my heart is sinking, or, my back feels like a brick, or my stomach is so upset. Trauma and grief is incredibly physical as well. Even if you're not thinking the emotion, it shows up in the body. And especially, I see this so much in men or people who tend to be a bit more disconnected from their emotions. So try to have these brief check-ins. How am I really? What was today or this week like for me? And if you feel like I can't do that, that's too much, I'm not talking about my feelings, that's okay. Trust wherever you're at. Even if I say something to you and you're like, I don't want to do that, that's too much, trust what may be right for you, because we all have different soothing strategies. So you want to acknowledge or be curious about, what am I feeling? What's here for me? And what you absolutely don't want to do is say things like, I shouldn't be feeling this way. What's wrong with me? I'm in a safe country. And completely disregarding, dismissing, invalidating what you're feeling. Is that what you're feeling matters. The pain you're experiencing now matters, and it's so valid that you allow yourself and you give yourself permission to feel this, no matter where you are in the world or how connected. You don't have to be directly connected to the country to be deeply wounded by what is happening around us. Okay, so I allow myself to feel it with compassion, name it, even if that's for 30 seconds, be curious about what it is. And then you want to search for soothing, not solutions. So you may say, I'm feeling so angry today. I feel so much anger. Okay, what do you need? So we acknowledge that. We don't fix it. What do you need in these 30 minutes that may be soothing to your nervous system, not solving? We don't cure the feeling. So that may be connecting with nature. It may be movement. It may be being alone. It may be connecting with someone you love. I heard someone say, connect with your pajama friend. So, someone that you don't need to get ready with, that you can just be with them in silence. It may be exercise. It may be cooking. It may be something you're working on. It may be art, but be curious. And the best, most powerful way to tell your nervous system that I got you is going to be a deep breath and connecting with. So one question coming through is how to go about work when we cannot focus and we also don't know when all of this is going to finish. So I hear you saying perhaps there is a struggle to concentrate, and there is a struggle to be as productive as you may be. And for many people, a trauma response right now can be meaninglessness, where it's like, my work doesn't feel as important as it usually does, or does this really matter when there's this happening around me? So one thing you want to do is notice that how you're being traumatized right now, it's impacting your concentration and even that sense of meaning or purpose in your work. So that's one thing, we're naming it. And then we're also saying, in order to tend to that, you want to go back to those basics of water, food, movement, rest, and movement, which may also improve some of those concentration things, your capacity to concentrate. And also be thinking about, what accommodation can I make in my work during this week when there's great uncertainty that may support me to get my nervous system feeling like I can focus a little bit more. And of course, that if at any point you're like, I just can't focus, it's absolutely okay to say, I think I need to take some time off. Or for some of us, work is our anchor. So you may say, I don't want to take time off. That's okay too. But you may say, perhaps I'm going to take a half day, right? So be thinking about what may work for you to meet you exactly where you're at right now. Another thing that can be really helpful during this time is making sure you go to a GP and do some general blood work as well. When our thyroid, vitamins, hormones are dysregulated, it can make navigating and holding trauma and grief, it can make it so much more difficult. So you may want to think about that as well. Okay. Okay, so another question that's come through is, in Lebanon, our heart goes out to everyone. And you know what? I didn't mention Lebanon in the beginning, so I'm sorry, but we're also thinking about Lebanon today. The question is, in Lebanon, our heart goes out to everyone, and we are also terrified this spills over. How to deal with this fear without being paralyzed? So I think it's really it's important that you are able to identify that perhaps one of your unique responses to the trauma is a feeling of paralysis, right? So you're noticing that, which is great. And then the question would be, what may you do today in this hour or this evening that may be comforting for you? And when we're having a very, very strong response, the intention is not what will bring pleasure or what may make you feel happy or good. That's not the goal when we're having a really big response. The goal is, what may make me feel neutral, right? Where I don't feel worse, but I feel okay when I walk or connect with nature or cocoon myself on the couch and connect with someone that I care about, or soothing music or silence. What can I do to begin to feel inside my body a little bit again? And of course, you do not have to go at this alone, where you're saying, I don't know how to soothe, I'm not sure what I'm feeling, that we are here for you. And there's 30 plus of us who are experts in working in the region, saying you don't have to go through this alone. We are here to guide you and support you. If you're struggling to say, where do I even begin? I'm not sure. Okay. So one question that's come through is, Farah, like you said, there's a lot of fear around now. How do you sit with the fear, and how do we face it? Like, what does one do? If you can give an example, if possible. So, excuse me. How do you sit with the fear? So we all have different starting points, and that's important. So think of that example of someone who works out a lot in the gym, right? So if I haven't been to the gym in a long time, or I don't go very regularly, and this is a metaphor, right? I'm not going to sit with that fear for 30 minutes or 60 minutes. If I struggle to even sit with it for 2 minutes, that may do harm, right? So you want to, when we say sit with it, your starting point may be a 3-minute check-in with this, which is saying, what's here for me? You're like, okay, I feel afraid. And if you want to stretch yourself a little bit, you may say, and only if it feels safe for you, is you may say, where do I feel that fear in my body? So we all have different entry points to how we sit with fear or difficult emotions as well. So some of you may say, where is that fear a bodily sensation? Is it in your jaw? Is it in your fist? Is it in your throat, your heart, your hips? So it may be sensation, and for other people it may be an image. You may say, if this fear were an image, what would it look like? And remember, we're not trying to cure it, we're just trying to give it voice. We call it name it to tame it, right? We're getting more clear about what's here for us. So that may be one way. And we do this a lot with children, right? Where you may say, what color is it? Or if it were a weather forecast, what would that fear look like? Even these open-ended questions, asking yourself or with someone you trust, is one way of sitting with it. But the anchor in sitting with it is, we're not trying to solve it. And a huge part of meeting our difficult, painful emotions is we must meet them with curiosity, with empathy, and we're not trying to solve, cure them, or meet them with intellect. So if someone in your life also comes to you and says, I'm feeling so scared today, and we're like, don't feel that way, it's going to be okay, or you're not even there, or this is just a part of life, or this is just how the world is. These are all very invalidating statements that can complicate our feelings and our examples of not sitting with it, right? Another example of not sitting with it would be, I feel something really difficult. It's like a disturbance. Maybe it's a thought or a sensation. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to work, or I'm going to eat, or I'm going to run, or I'm going to smoke, or I'm going to. Now, numbing or distraction can be a helpful temporary solution. For some of us, it's like, not today. I can't open that today. But I want you to acknowledge it and say, whoa, I'm feeling that, and I'm going to come back to that on Friday. Now, emotions are not so neat where they come up that way, but that is also an important way of moving with the difficult emotions in a considered, conscious way, right? I hope that answers your questions. I feel like I said many things. So that sitting with it, being curious about it, open-ended questions, and then saying, what may I do in this 30 minutes or in this hour that will be soothing to what I'm feeling? So I may say, if I just walk through it really quick, I may say, okay, I'm feeling rage, right? I'm feeling a lot of anger. I feel and for me, I think image is important for me. So that rage feels, it feels really hot. It feels black. It feels like fire inside of here. And it's very concentrated. Okay. So I'm just getting curious about it. Image may not resonate with you. And I may say, what could I do in this hour that would be soothing for me? And I'll say, I definitely want to turn down the lights. I want to spray something that feels soothing. I want to connect with someone that I love and just check in and see how they're doing. All of these things I don't solve the rage, but there are ways to sit with it and regulate it, right? I hope that's a good starting point or an example. One question I see coming through is, how can I cry? I'm unable to cry and I feel very heavy. So one, I want you to know is that not crying does not mean that you're not hurting, right? That may be your response. And just because you're not crying does not mean you're not as impacted as someone else. So that's one. So there's nothing wrong with not crying. But two, if you say, but I really want to cry, okay, you can't rush it, but you may be curious about, I would want to ask you, what may help you get into that space where you may invite tears if they want to come? Is there a song that you'd like to listen to that helps you sink into that feeling of sadness? So again, these are some things that you may do to create safety where tears may come, but we often cannot control when that may come up. Okay. And the last question is that I'll take is, excuse me, how can I help my friends when I feel super helpless, especially when they ask for help and when I know things don't look too bright right now? So I'm not sure what the friend would be asking for help for, but I would say we really cannot support or help our friends either emotionally or practically unless we are okay first. So one of the best things that we can do is really invest in taking care of ourselves, water, food, movement, rest, soothing ourselves, making sure we're creating more safety in the body, which will only then will we be able to engage with the people we love. So one thing you may do is think about how would you uniquely say to a loved one, and this is easier said than done, I'm flooded right now, or I really want to be there for you, but I'm running on empty, right? So think about, and again, I may say that, and it would be really hard for me to say I don't have any energy. If someone I love was like, I'm not okay, I'd be, but that's not the healthiest thing, right? You want to say, I want you to think about what would sound like you and what words would you use to kindly and clearly say, I love you. Maybe you don't love them. Maybe it's like a colleague. Maybe you love your colleague too, but maybe say like, I really care about you. I'm concerned about you. I'm feeling so hopeless to help you. Can we talk next week? Or can I check in with you in a few days? So be curious about how you may express that, but also know that most people, they're not searching for solutions or a fix. When our friends or colleagues say, it's just such dark times, or I'm really devastated, the best thing that we can do is validate it and just be with it. So you may say, what's that been like for you? What's been the hardest part for you this week? I can't even imagine what you're going through right now. If you'd like to talk, I'm here to listen. So we want to also change this anchor that we need to fix, solve, or cure what our loved ones are feeling. That is not what we want to do. Empathy is, I don't know what's going to happen or how we're going to get through this, but I'm going to walk alongside you with empathy the best that I can. Okay, so thank you for taking the time to be here. Give yourself some transition space. We've just sat with difficult feelings, painful feelings for about 60 minutes. So get up, get out of the space you're in, and give yourself some transition time. And I hope you know how much what you're feeling matters.